Es freut uns außerordentlich, mit Ihnen heute Abend zu sein, gleichzeitig nah und weit. Ich heiße Mererid Hopwood und sitze daheim in Westwales und zusammen mit Ifor ab Glyn, der sich das Gespräch aus Nordwales anschließt, möchten wir anhand einiger Gedichte Ihnen etwas über Cymru oder Wales mitteilen. Es wird zwischendurch auf Walisisch, Englisch und ein bisschen Deutsch gehen. Mal sehen, ob das klappt. We very much hope so, gobeithio'n wir. Und wir fangen mit Ifor an, der seit 2016 unser sogenannter Nationaldichter ist. Und vielleicht später werden wir mehr über die walisische Dichtertradition erzählen. Also Ifor, bitte sehr.
Diolch yn fawr, Mererid. Auf Deutsch, das meint vielen Dank, Mererid. Und vielen Dank, oder diolch yn fawr, für diese Gelegenheit, Ihnen mitzusprechen. Aber ich kann leider nur ein bisschen Schülerdeutsch sprechen, also jetzt weiter auf Englisch. Wales is one of the 4 constituent countries of the United Kingdom. It has the same area as a German Land, such as Anhalt-Saxon or Hessen, and a population of 3 million. Although we are, of course, dwarfed by our English neighbours with their population of 56 million, we are culturally and politically distinct. Since 1999, Wales has enjoyed a measure of autonomy in certain areas of government, and we have our own elected assembly, or Senedd, with lawmaking powers. Although our population is small compared to Germany, remember that 7 out of the 27 member states of the EU have a smaller population than Wales, and almost a third of the member states of the United Nations. Well, one of the things that distinguishes us culturally, of course, is the Welsh language, spoken by approximately 20% of the population, but understood by many more. Now, my first poem is a kind of love poem to our land, but the language is implicit in that. It was inspired by the experience of flying for the first time from my home in the north of the country to our capital city, Cardiff, or Caerdydd in the south. As Welsh poets, we're often called upon to travel around the country to present our work by train or by car. And as my day job also involves traveling all over Wales, filming documentaries, I like to think that I know the country quite well. But flying over Wales for the first time gave me a completely new perspective. And the poem was written on a day of new perspectives in 2011. It was the day of a referendum that ratified the Welsh public's desire to take greater responsibility for our own affairs. And that's the symbolism of the X at the end, which can signify both. Gwers. Trwy hedfan dros Gymru mae dysgu i charu. Hongian yn araf uwch ei phen ei hydnabod o onglau anghyfarwydd. Ac rhwng cellwair y cymylau blew geifr, dacw benryn llun fel llawes a dorchwyd ar frys. Dacw geian gytyma bler am ddirgelwch y mynydd, wedi pwytho'n gain gan y cloddia. A dacw lechi'n domeni wedi cribo o'r tir fel hoel bysir drwy'r tywod, a llynoedd bychu'n llachar fel mana gen I cyfrin yn hael yr hwyr. Ac wrth drwyno ffenest yr awyren heno, mae'r gweddusau'n mynnu adrodd padar yr enwa. Dyfi Junction, Cors Fochno, ath anaw fel siffrwd carwr dros ei chorff. Dowlais, Penrhys, Gilfach Goch. Ac wrth iddi gau swildo dan len, mae cysgod yr awyren yn symud fel croes dros y cymylau gwynion, yn sws ar lythyr caru'r oesau, yn bleidlais betrus dros ei pharhad.
Diolch yn fawr I ti, Ifor. Ein leises Bitten, sie möge fortbestehen. As Ifor explained, the sie refers to Wales, the country, but his final line, I'm sure the pronoun encompasses Welsh, the language too. As in German, die Sprache, language in Welsh is feminine. Ifor will tell you more about the context of Welsh as a minoritized language in a moment. But in the meantime, I would like to tell you something about the language itself. Herself. Sie ist, wie Sie wahrscheinlich schon wissen, eine keltische Sprache. Das heißt, sie gehört zum gleichen Zweig des Sprachstammbaums wie Irisch, Schottisch-Gälisch, Bretonisch, Kornisch und so weiter. Wir sind Geschwister und Cousins, sagen wir mal. Die sogenannten P-Celts sind wir. Für uns zum Beispiel heißt Sohn Map, während für die Cousin heißt er Mac. Der Sohn von Donald ist dann Mab oder MacDonald. Und wo wir Pen sagen, sagen die Cousins in Irland und Schottland Ken und so weiter. But in such a short space of time, perhaps the most important thing for us to stress is how significantly different the Welsh language is from English. These are neighbours, but not sisters or cousins even. They're not dialects or variations. They are different languages. And languages that are different from one another offer different ways of configuring the world. An obvious remark, perhaps, but quite a difficult concept sometimes for a monolingual mindset to grasp, a mindset which seems to believe that having more than one language is simply a case of having more than one set of labels for the same set of things. Not at all. The things themselves are somehow often different. Einige Beispiele. Auf Walisisch erstaunlicherweise hören wir Gerüche. Auf Walisisch können wir gar nichts haben. I have something. Das ist für uns überhaupt kein Begriff. Die Sachen sind einfach mit uns. Und das mag ich sehr. Es deutet irgendwie darauf hin, dass die weise Sprache schon weiß, dass zu besitzen immer nur vorübergehend ist. And we don't need to go further than the word Wales, which etymologically speaking means the other. Clearly not a name we gave ourselves, while Cymru, the Welsh word for Wales, comes from two elements, com, together, zusammen, and bro, margo, ein Stück Land, irgendwie am Rand. And I particularly like this because it embraces everyone. Whoever is here sharing this piece of land is a Cymro or Cymrais, if they want to be one, Waliser oder Waliserin. And a better translation of Cymru, I often think, is the together land. And one day I realized that I needed to write in English what it is to see the world through Welsh-speaking eyes if I were to go part of the way towards explaining this. So if you will forgive me, my first poem is uncharacteristically going to be in English. Und ich sollte vielleicht auch erklären, dass für uns die Vokalen ganz offen sind. Wir sagen A und O zum Beispiel, also nie E und O. Also mal sehen. What's Wales in Welsh? We're not afraid of flies. We say hello, not hello. The jaw and the mouth go south and don't close around the nose. Hello, not hello. And we have two words for you. And my grass is blue. And the word for blue is glass, not glass. And that matters, for it never shatters. Because when I try really hard, I do my best blue. And when I'm sad, the little shoe hurts in a place where you don't know because the dirt's mine and that's fine. And I say yes in as many ways as there are questions. I listen on things. I hear smells like the smell of smoke. And though I know that smother and choke are brothers, somehow I don't know you, for I only know facts, and You're not a fact. You're an act of being beyond just living. And there's a word for living that's the same as dying. And a poem is a song, and it's the half of walking. And I can't be afraid. Only fear, like a cough and a cold, can be upon me. And things that are told are said against. And we talk always with, never to. And a kutch is a hug, and loud is high. And when I go to sleep, I don't mind the bugs, though I go to the field of night, where I wait to see a dream that will light the candle of my eye. And I'm savvy enough to have absolutely nothing. Things are just with me for now, borrowed perhaps, like the trainers I call pumps or daps. And when I see rain, I see old women with sticks. And if 6 is half a dozen, then 50 is half 100, and 40 is double 20, and 19 is 4 on 15. And if you want to be the boss, you've got to be the bridge, because a prince is not a primo, but a guide. And pride means strong. So, friend, as my song comes to an end, let me say that when you call us foreign, we'll open a hand and invite you to join us, for we're the people of the together land. Diolch.
Diolch, Mererid. Well, Welsh and German are both part of an extremely fragile worldwide linguistic ecology. And it's in recognition of that fragility that the United Nations have announced that the decade commencing next year will be a decade of action for indigenous languages. Now, there are some 7,000 languages in our world, but there is a real risk that many of them will be lost in the next few years. To give you an idea of the scale of the problem, now German is the 12th largest language in terms of numbers of speakers. Only 200 languages of the 7,000 have more than 2 million speakers, but between them, they are spoken by 88% of the world's population. More than half of the world's languages have less than 10,000 speakers. That's just over half the capacity of the Osnabrück Stadion. Now, Welsh has over 600,000 speakers. And in the list of languages ranked by numbers of speakers, we sit at around number 430. But if we as speakers of Welsh are concerned about the future of our language, sadly, this only underlines the scale of the threat to the linguistic diversity of our species. That is, if we, the Welsh, as speakers of one of the 500 strongest languages in the world, are worried about the survival of our language, it doesn't bode well for most of the 6,500 smaller languages. 9 out of 10 are under threat. So the challenges facing the Welsh language are considerable. Large numbers of our young people seek educational and economic opportunities outside of Wales, and many sadly will not return. Over the years, these young immigrants have sustained Welsh culture in a sizable diaspora around the world, particularly in the United States of America, Patagonia in Argentina, and of course the larger cities of England, Liverpool, Manchester, and London. I myself was brought up in London. When I was young, there were 40 chapels there where one could worship in the Welsh language. There was a rugby club, a social club, and a small school. But if emigration is challenging for the Welsh language, well, immigration is all the more so. 27% of our population, according to the 2011 census, were born outside of Wales, and 3/4 of those were born in England. Now, this can have a disproportionate impact on the more thinly populated rural areas where the Welsh language has predominated. However, some incomers embrace the host language, embrace Welsh, and in our midst we find Welsh speakers with splendidly German surnames such as Eisentraut, Löffler, Sturfelder, Baum, Otting, Köhler, and of course, Daniela Schlick, who translated my first poem. Well, the second poem I'd like to share with you is called Lleisio, and it was written to mark the Welsh launch of the UNESCO Year of indigenous languages. The opening Latin quotation is from the writings of Carl Linnaeus, and this time the translation will be in English by yours truly. Lleisio. Nomina si pereunt, perit et cognitio rerum. Os derfydd enwa, derfydd hefyd dirnad petha. Dwedwch felly fawrion o wybodaeth ym mha fodd mae achub iaith. Nid trwy chofnodi, neu chyseglu, na chloi geiriau'n gacamwci glidiog a lynodd sgwennu'r sawl sy'n stelcian hyd ein cloddia. Cans cadno wedi stwffio yw pob Cymraeg llyfr. Ei introed oediog ni syfla mwy, a'i lygyd gwydyr sydd ddall. Yn y llafar y mae ei lleidder, a thafodau plant yw ei pharhad.
Diolch yn fawr, Ifor. Well, yes, it would be impossible to give a session, no matter how short, that hopes to introduce Welsh poetry to friends in other countries without a word about the bardic tradition. Our national anthem begins with a line that claims, "With a land of poets, gwlad beirdd." And for many, the climax of our main cultural festival, the Eisteddfod, are the two ceremonies which honour the winning poets with a crown, yes, a real proper crown, and a corona, or a chair, yes, a chair, an enormous, beautiful chair where the winning poet gets to keep forever. But to win the chair, you have to write according to a particular poetic grammar, a method once described in the Princeton Encyclopedia as the most sophisticated system of sound patterning, beg your pardon, in the Princeton Encyclopedia as the most sophisticated system of sound patterning practiced in any poetry in the world. The Welsh word for this is cynghanedd, which simply translated is harmony. The music of every line seems to travel both horizontally and vertically. The words seem to create a soundscape of many dimensions as they correspond to one another, backwards and forwards in rhyme, assonance, consonants, importantly respecting the stress of each group of words. Diese Tradition ist schon alt. Wir haben Beispiele, die aus dem 7. Jahrhundert stammen, und bemerkenswert ist sie eine ununterbrochene Tradition. Geregelt schon, aber doch flexibel genug, die modernsten Geschichten und Themen zu erzählen. It is said that it takes an apprenticeship of 9 years to master or mistress this craft, but in our short slot, we can at least look at one example. So here is what we call an englyn, a verse with exactly 30 syllables over 4 lines, and I hope you will hear and see how each word works hard to harmonize with other words in the verse. Also das Beispiel heißt digon, und digon würde man mit genug oder es reicht übersetzen. Ein hawydd beinydd beinos ydyw mwy, ond y mae'n ddi achos, yn fofnau oer, yn nofn nos, digon yw un ffrind agos. And to translate? Well, translating this cynghanedd is a bit like singing a song by just saying the words. But it's something like this. Genug. Tagsüber, nachtsüber möchten wir immer mehr. Solch ein vergebliches Mögen. In meiner kältesten Angst, in meiner tiefsten Nacht, ein einziger, enger Freund. Und es ist genug. Digon. Ein hawydd beinydd beinos ydyw mwy, ond y mae'n ddi achos, yn fofnau oer, yn nofn nos, digon yw un ffrind agos. Ifor.
Hyfryd, diolch. Well, here's a fun fact for you. Germany was, until recently, Wales's biggest export market. And despite the collective act of self-harm, which we know as Brexit, and you can probably guess which way I voted in that particular referendum, Welsh exports to Germany are still very important to our economy. Another fun fact: after the Irish and the Americans, German tourists are the next biggest group of overseas visitors to Wales. But the cultural connections between our two countries go much deeper than this. German universities have maintained an interest in the Celtic languages since the 19th century. Welsh was taught at Humboldt University in Berlin for over a century. The Zeitschrift für keltische Philologie was established there in 1896. And Welsh is still taught in the universities of Leipzig and Bonn. Only 2 universities in next-door England offer similar courses. So I still consider myself a Welsh European, even though recent developments at Westminster try to steer us in a different direction. However, the need to maintain political, economic, and cultural contact between our two countries is as important as ever. And my closing poem was inspired by an event in Germany. In 2009, I had the pleasure of making a Welsh language documentary about the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, relying on the contributions of a number of Welsh-speaking Germans, many of whom had been educated at Humboldt. I've always been interested in the different dialects of our own Welsh language, and whilst making the documentary, I became aware of how the wall had had an impact on the dialects of the German language. So this poem was written to mark the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, and although ostensibly it is about Germany, it's also a warning to any society that thinks that building walls is the answer. The language of the poem, a macaronic combination of Welsh and German, is in itself a refutation of that mindset and a celebration of cultural exchange at several levels. The translation is once again by Daniela Schlick. Berlins Geistermauer, sawl I weddillion y wal. Mewn cerdd, daw geirian ben a'i ffin eitha, y deall a'r camddeall, ac yma cawsant eu tolldi'n rhaniad concret, yn frawddeg o wal I gipio'ch gwynt wrth ailganu tair byw a beddi'r meirw yn llain wag, ac eto'n gwadd dehongliadau gwahanol, Schutzfa oder Schandmauer. Corlan i'r cyfiawn, yn te cwilydd mewn concret. Mae wastad 2 ochr I wal. Ac yma bu 2 wlad gynt ac 1 iaith yn ei rhannu. Vom Muttiheft zum Feierabendheim, o fora oes, nes rhoi'r tools ar y bar. Ac wedi'r cyfannu, bu rhai geiriau yn gwrthod colli blas. Trinkfix, Eierkuchen, Knusperflocken, Rondo Café. Y geiriau styfnig sy'n gwrthod derbyn I timpio'r rhain, bod I dal yn viertel 11, nid viertel nach 10. Rhaid dysgu felly rhannu ein hanesion. Hören wir einander zu und nehmen wir uns gegenseitig ernst. Achos pan fo un gerdd yn peidio, mae'r llinella yn parhau. A'i geiriau'n dal I fynd ben a'i ffin eitha. Y deall a'r camddeall. Ond, yn ein gwledydd, cwyd waliau newydd. A ni ein hunain a'i cododd nhw. Ond nhw wir selbst können sie einreißen. A ni yn unig allai dymchwel nhw. Ysdwedodd bardd o Gymro mawr ei glod, nid ydym yn credu mewn waliau, ond maen nhw'n bod.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Ifor. Well, we hope that there are no walls between us here. And as for our conversation, it's come to an end. Mal sehen, ob Sie jetzt Fragen haben und ob wir sie beantworten können. Vielen Dank.